Welcome to the Diversity and Inclusion on Air podcast. This podcast is a program of the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges Diversity Matters Initiative. The podcast explores various issues related to diversity and inclusion in the veterinary profession and provides the AAVMC an opportunity to offer ongoing diversity programming to member institutions as well as all veterinary professionals. My name is Dr. Lisa Greenhill, and I am the Senior Director for Institutional Research and Diversity at the AAVMC. Today, I'm talking about women faculty, the pandemic, and juggling. That's right, juggling. But not fruit, life, right? So when the COVID-19 pandemic started, we certainly know everybody kind of went home, things closed, essential businesses were open, schools closed down for in-person, everything kind of moved to this kind of remote life that we continue to live a bit. And what ended up happening or being revealed during this major transition is that working women and femmes have been hit with tons of additional burdens that resulted in many, many women stepping out of the workforce. So just in the US alone, as of February of this year, about 3 million women stepped out of the workforce, a figure roughly 4 times that of men. Closed childcare facilities, caregiving, persistent gender roles really just resulted in women kind of saying, I can't do everything, so I'm just going to quit and pull back and do the things that I need to do at home. Earlier this year, the National Academies of Science released a report arguing that academic women, for our purposes, veterinary medical education, lost so much ground, specifically in STEM. Women are not able to get into their labs. They're not publishing at the same rate as their male counterparts during the pandemic because of the additional burdens, just not quite as air quote productive in terms of academic roles, certainly productive in other spaces, but not productive in this particular space. So I just kind of wanted to talk a bit about what this has been like and look at it from different perspectives. So to discuss all of this for academic veterinary medicine, I'm joined by 4 incredible women who I just love and adore and just admire so much. Doctors Debbie Cochiever, Mandy Martinot, Lupna Nasser, and Tamara Hancock. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Awesome. So as we get on into this, I love for guests to tell us all a little bit about themselves. So Debbie, we're going to start with you.
All right. Well, thank you, Lisa. It's actually really good to see you. Virtually see you. So my name is Debbie Cochiever. I am broadcasting from Grafton, Massachusetts, which is about 40 miles west of Boston, close to Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University, where I've worked at Tufts for about, nearly 15 years now. But really, I hail from Texas, spent 21 years at Texas A&M. I'm a veterinarian, a PhD in cell molecular biology, and pretty much just love to teach. And so I spent a lot of time in the classroom. But then also, I guess in the last 10 to 12 years, have really become interested in, engaged in One Health, and even beyond the One Health, the science of One Health, sort of the diplomacy of One Health. How do we get all the parts of our world that are human, animal, and the environment to actually talk together? Because if you just look at COVID, there's a lot of reasons why those communications need to go on to solve problems that affect everybody. So I'm here today as a faculty member at Tufts, and I very much appreciate joining. Whoops, you're muted.
Just because we have to have one COVID quote, you're muted, like on the podcast. So we're gonna go to Mandy. Mandy, also at Tufts. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, so just like Debbie, I'm also faculty, a fairly new assistant professor at Tufts Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine. I'm also a veterinarian, and I'm a anatomic pathologist as well. So I do basic science research. My primary research focus is actually on tuberculosis vaccines. But because of my my side hustle as a pathologist during the COVID pandemic, I became very, very much involved in helping to validate the animal models that we were using to look at COVID-19 pathology, SARS-CoV-2, trying to figure out which animal models we could use to develop vaccines and therapeutics. And so my experience has been a little bit different in the sense that I actually got a lot more work during the pandemic, but it was very difficult to do because I had to do it at home. So thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
Sure, sure. All right, we're going to go to Tamara.
Well, hello, Tamara Hancock. I use she, her pronouns. I'm at the University of Missouri. I'm also a veterinarian and a pathologist, but a clinical pathologist. And I wear a lot of different hats. So I'm a new assistant teaching professor here in veterinary pathology, but I also have a PhD in education. And so that kind of necessarily puts you in these different circumstances where folks want you in an administrative role. So I coordinate their curricular and student outcomes for the college, and I'm the director for academic success here at the University of Missouri. My research really focuses on the social context of learning and becoming veterinarians and veterinary students. So kind of like that professional identity development. And yeah, I am a mom. And so I've taken on caregiving roles that have been brand new over the past year and a half now, I think. But I'm very gracious and humbled to be a part of this panel. And thank you for the invitation, Lisa.
Absolutely. Welcome, welcome. And last but certainly not least, Lubna.
Oh, thank you very much, Lisa. Like everyone else, I'm delighted to be here on the panel. So my name's Lupna Nasser. I identify as she, her. So a little bit about me. I'm a British-born Pakistani. I live in Glasgow. I'm at the University of Glasgow and I work at the School of Veterinary Medicine. Numerous hats. I do a lot of teaching. I teach in the veterinary medicine degree program. I do a lot of teaching on the Bachelor Veterinary Science program as well. Still managing to do some research. And one of my other main roles in the School of Veterinary Medicine is that I'm the associate head for diversity and inclusion in our school. Like Tamara, I'm also a mum, and yes, that has brought numerous challenges to our lives, and also we care for myself and my partner. We care for my husband's mother as well, so there's a bit of elder care involved as well as childcare as well. So yes, I'm delighted to be part of this conversation. I think we've got lots to talk about.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Lisa, yeah. I feel remiss that I didn't say I'm a mom too, except that my kids are 33 and 36. So they weren't exactly homeschooling, but yes.
Yes, I was dealing with toddler care, which I felt like we could get into the challenges of starting your academic career with a 4-month-old. So,
oh my!
and then hitting the pandemic right when you were starting to actually get to work.
Oh wow! Yes.
Yeah.
So for folks that don't know, I am also a mom. So we've got a whole mom squad here. My daughter is now 20. She is home because of the pandemic. And it's been interesting. And so it's been great. I'm glad that she's here. It's been interesting. There's been some juggling, even if she is 20. So let's talk a little bit pre-pandemic. And Debbie, I'm going to start with you because you served in a number of different roles, right, in academia. And I really am kind of curious to hear just your perspective on what are some of those challenges just pre-pandemic, or what we will probably continue to see post-pandemic when it's all over, that are experienced by faculty who identify as women.
it's such a rich topic. Maybe rich isn't the right word, but I remember, Mandy, your comments really took me back to when I had my children. I was finishing up my PhD and starting a faculty position at Texas A&M, and that continued. Obviously, when the kids were growing up, I was going through the ranks, and so it really impacts every piece of what you do. But in an interesting way, I would say it's a positive impact. That doesn't mean it's always positive in terms of time, but I think the fact that you have that dimension to your life and your priorities become so, in many ways, focused on your kids and how they're going to do. And so you're lucky as an academician because mostly you do have some flexibility in a schedule. Not always. Again, none of these are absolutes, but I just remember, the book fairs, right? I was like a big book fair supporter in my kids' elementary school. And you could actually manage yourself. So you could go and work the book fair. And so on one hand, I just think, and the dimensions, again, that kids add to your lives are just priceless. And so I think that is a plus, but it just means that you as a woman, and you already have this tendency to be able to just get down and work your buns off, that actually encourages you to do that, which works for about 20 years. And then you start to say, wow, maybe I should balance this better. And so I think the progression for me has just been, to continue to do that really for a very long time. I was fortunate to be a senior administrator at the vet school here at Tufts and then at the main university. And in all those roles, you just have to put your head down and say, I'm going to get it all done. And you do, but it is at some cost that people should recognize earlier than I did. And probably do better at balancing.
Are the academic systems really designed to help you with that balance? Certainly we know that, yes, there is some flexibility. We worked at, there's so many memes about the Scholastic book fair. I was a book fair kid.
Clifford the Big Red Dog was my favorite.
You get that $15 and you think I am rich. I am going to the book fair. But beyond that kind of self-managed juggling, does the higher ed system is it really supportive? Is it, what are some of those elements? And certainly anybody can hop in here pre-pandemic, what are some of those things that really allowed you to really pursue the aspiration of having a more balanced life, before the 20-year clock hits?
I think at least here in the UK, so we've been very much involved in the Athena Swan Gender Equality Charter now for several years, and that has made a huge difference, I think, to academia and higher education, in that it's brought this agenda to the table and it's discussed, and we have family-friendly working policies. We provide support for women. It's not perfect, and we still don't think we've always got parity. But there's been a significant improvement, I think, for women. I think, as you were mentioning, Deborah, that the balancing is always it's a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge. And I think, again, like you, in my earlier career, it's you just get on with it. You get down and you do the work, and you just have to do it. You find a way, but there are consequences to that. You do then experience some burnout, and I do think there has been a slight shift through particularly Athena Swan, in that we do put measures in place. We do provide a lot more support. We, for example, have core working hours between 10 and 4 or 10 and 3, which means that people with children are able to drop them off at school and pick up from school. And those sort of small adjustments have been great, particularly for me, and without the pressure of thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be late for a meeting, I'm not going to be there. So it allows you to have a bit more sort of balance. So I think that has been really, really positive for us. I think the issue of workload still exists, I think, and I'm sure we'll come on to that later on. But I think there's some of the sort of key points that I think are important sort of pre-pandemic, and that we have moved forward. I think there are many issues that we still need to resolve, but my concern is I think we've now taken a back step.
Yeah. So, there are, in STEM in general, there are about 27% of STEM faculty are women, right? In veterinary medicine, that's a bit higher, but women still don't make up a full half of faculty. They're getting there, and I think that we'll probably see it sometime, hopefully in the next decade or so. But that there's still a fair amount of underrepresentation. We're starting to certainly see the much better representation among the administrator ranks. But how does that kind of underrepresentation or kind of minoritized experience, what is that like for academic women? And so, Tamara, we'll start with you, and Mandy, we'll come to you in a minute.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like that, in conversation with what Debbie was mentioning in the beginning about being able to have flexibility in our schedule as professors is certainly a privilege. But I think as a woman and being underrepresented in your department or in your field, even maybe saying out loud, oh, I'm bagging off this afternoon because I'm going to go run the book fair for my kid.
I never said that.
You can't.
Not around.
That's it, right? Like you can, and it's not. Yeah. I think that doesn't feel welcome to kind of live your full little self and bring that to the table. And I think it contributes as a junior faculty. And I don't know how much Mandy would kind of put on this. Like, there's these questions that come up for me. Is this because I'm junior and new? Is this because I'm a woman? Is this because I'm a mother? Is this all of those things? None of these things? Is it all in my head? And so these kinds of feelings of being an imposter and not knowing what I'm doing and if I'm doing it right. And then like that just kind of puts in the mix of being first gen, and like, I wish someone would have like helped me like level up class wise to navigate these spaces. I mean, I think that it really does kind of contribute to the questions of like, am I worthy of being here? Or is this all in my head? Am I sane? Should I get help? I mean, I should get help for other reasons, I'm sure, but like, is this a part of it? Does this need to come up in my therapy sessions? I think it's that, and then in conjunction with a lack of kind of solidarity or allyship, right? Like, certainly there's plenty of men who are in caregiving roles, whether parental or elder care or any other caregiving roles, that may be able to help kind of have a chilling effect on this cultural, social norm of like, we're not going to say I'm going to the book fair. I'm not going to say I'm going to the Valentine's party at my kid's daycare. I'm just going to go away.
And then you work twice as hard, right? You work twice as hard to do whatever it was you didn't do when you were gone to the book fair. So
yeah. And like pretend to not be racked with guilt the whole time in both spaces. Absolutely. Yeah. Mandy was going to say something.
I was just going to say that it's funny because Debbie started the conversation, and I have this, I don't think it's appropriate, but I have learned not to mention that, that I have children right away, or that this actually impacts as a professional. And having been sort of in the, it's a refreshing thing to be at a veterinary school because there's so many women and so many women with children. But for the last 15 years, I've actually been at the downtown medical center, Harvard School of Public Health, Harvard Medical School, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. And it is extremely male. It's not only are they all physicians, but it's extremely male dominated. And at some point, I've just basically learned that is not what I want people to know first off, because it will automatically give them some perspective of me that they won't think of me as a scientist first, they'll think of me as a mother first, and that will establish certain expectations or lack of expectation for that reason. And so I have learned not to mention that right off the bat until I'm in a safe place. And so it was so refreshing for Tamara to be like, I have children and that's what we're talking about here. And I was like, yes, that's great. I can say it too now. But it's true. And I've even had, like now the NIH has instituted, like they have this mechanism where as a woman, if you've had children or you've had setbacks from maternity leaves and things like that, that you can actually sort of write that into your progress report. And I remember having one of my former mentors review my progress report, and he was like, or my application for promotion to like instructor, and he's like, no, he's like, don't put any of that in there. It's like, just don't, like, you don't need to put that. So essentially he was, I could have put it in, but he was like, just focus on your accomplishments. Like, you don't need to, I would steer away from that. And so
because having parenting is not an accomplishment. No, I'm like, it's just like,
but so I mean, everybody says that these things are coming into place, but depending on where you are, it's like they say it, but there's still this feeling that I shouldn't do it, that I should only do it as a last resort. Like if I really haven't done enough to like get that promotion or get tenure or get that next grant, then I might want to throw that in there as a last resort. And
wow, it's like not a part of the story. It's an excuse for
right. It's like, what have you managed to accomplish? And if that doesn't measure up quite to where you think you should be, maybe you could sort of use that as your your excuse.
But I find it really, really interesting because, we started with, we haven't even mentioned the pandemic yet. We're going to get there. But, this idea that, okay, so you have this flexibility. So I'm going to go work, the book fair, because the book fair is really important. But we don't tell anybody because there's a price to pay. Like, that's right. Just know that that's a part of the problem. That is a part of the problem.
Doctor's appointments are acceptable. Childcare pickup has become acceptable. So when I'm like 5 o'clock, I'm out. Like everybody's like, okay, we can't ask her to stay later. That's fine. But the book fair, no.
More to do with the fact that we probably, folks that have parented young kids or kids that need outside, caregiving while we're working, also typically know that there is a drop time where things become more expensive. It's usually like
by the minute.
Yeah. So just as a marker, because it's fascinating listening to you guys and really encouraging that things are changing. Definitely more to change. But I just remember first child, Texas, a long time ago, pregnancy was an illness. You had to take your sick leave. That was effectively maternity leave. So I noticed, and it's not just for women, but for women and men, at least we're moving closer. And I think Europe did this a long time ago, right? The US is not forging any frontiers here. That we're getting a little better, but hopefully we'll keep going that direction.
Even in Massachusetts, it's still disability leave.
Yeah,
seriously.
Disability.
That's great.
Goodness.
Our 8 weeks is short-term disability. And so when I started at BI, that was if you did not register for your because it was an option to get short-term disability. And if you did not pay that extra $14 a paycheck to get short-term disability, you were effectively not going to be able to have paid maternity leave. And nobody told me that. I just happened to know that. I was telling every pregnant woman or any woman of reproductive age on my floor, like when they got hired, make sure you sign up for your short-term disability because that is your maternity leave.
Okay, maybe things haven't changed that much on that count.
It just repackaged. Wow.
Yep.
One of the OBGYN physicians on in my department, she was having her third child and she switched jobs from being a primary care physician as an OBGYN at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center to being a primary research appointment. And she could not take maternity leave because she hadn't been in her job for a full year because her job title changed, even though she was at the same institution. And so she could not get paid maternity leave as an OBGYN at the hospital where she worked for her third child. And so it was sort of like this hush hush, like, well, take your time off, but just you're working on grants, just don't come to work, because she could not get it because of that technicality. It's appalling. Like, we're in Massachusetts, like we're supposed to be like, healthcare wise, we are making some strides that other states haven't done yet in terms of health insurance. And it's just amazing. It's truly amazing.
I think it's definitely harder for more junior staff. And if you're new to an organization, then you don't know what the sort of culture is in the place, of whether you can say, actually, I need to go and pick up children, or and I think perhaps, it's just perhaps being older, and I've been in our institute now my whole career, in fact. And now I'm not afraid of just saying, if it's Christmas time and the kids are in their school nativity or school show, I will just say, no, I'm not attending that meeting because my kids are in. I'm going to go and see this. And I guess there's some sort of privilege there because I'm established. I've been there some time. But I think by doing that, it's sort of opening it up for the more junior staff to be able to say, well, actually, if you can do it, surely I can do it. And we can do it. Staff can do it. You can take flexible leave, you can work extra hours. And so there are ways around doing it. It's just that there is a fear of actually talking about it, there's a fear of mentioning it. And I definitely think that's harder for more junior colleagues.
Wow. So now we're going to so this is just for everyone that's watching and listening. This is before we even get to the pandemic. And I know that some people have heard me talk about just trash environments. I'm sure where everybody works is a lovely, lovely place, but policies and practices sometimes create situations that are just less than hospitable, right? And so we've heard some examples of that. So what have you observed are some of the unique challenges that have been brought about by the pandemic? And Lubna, I'm going to start with you, just because you kind of previewed a little bit of a sandwich caregiving situation you got going, because certainly we talk a lot about kids, but we don't also talk about the fact that none of us are getting any younger. And so, sometimes we have parents and aunties and uncles and other folks that, we also have to look out for.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, we are, we've got, our children are 10 and 12, but we're also looking after my husband's mum, who's sort of in her late 70s, and she lives on her own. And it was about making sure that she was supported during lockdown, partly because we were all in isolation for her own mental health. And I mean, quite honestly, when I look back on that very first lockdown, I'm not quite sure how we did it. I think you just rolled your sleeves up and got on with it, because there wasn't a choice. With two kids at home, homeschooling, the eldest was pretty much all right doing it by herself. The youngest needed a bit more support, but my husband's also an academic, and we just did not have the time to support them. It was literally throw food at you at lunchtime and then back to the computer, and the whole pivoting to online. And I think that's been one of the impacts that I've seen on my female colleagues, is that whole pivoting everything to online, and the amount of time and effort and work that has involved has been phenomenal. It's been a huge workload. So that's been really, really tricky. And, somehow we sort of came through it, but it was a pretty awful experience that none of us, and particularly the children, don't want to have to revisit. And I think in terms of some of my colleagues as well, we've also had, during that first lockdown, we still had some staff working on campus. Some of our clinical academics were still, and the stress and the anxiety associated with that whilst in the pandemic, in terms of worrying about their health, worrying about, are they going to take COVID home, to shielding relatives. There were so many dimensions to it, particularly during that first pandemic. I think we got better over time, but we all know that the majority of the care and responsibilities fall on women as well. That we still end up doing the labour, but it's also the emotional labour as well. It's not just the making sure there's food on the table. It's just dealing with the emotional aspect of it as well. I think for some families, it's been keeping the family together. We've been in a crisis. It's, how do you keep a family together, particularly where you've got children that have been away at university and they come home and everybody's back in the same environment. It might be tight for space. I mean, I've heard really horrendous stories of, people not having space, having to use an ironing board, for example, really early on as a desk. Fortunately, our institution were great at resolving issues around that. But, it's all, and there's lots of things about privilege that came out as well. You've got a big house and a garden, and so many aspects to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even, the housing market. So we have a really strong housing market here in the DC area, but, the open floor plan, that's gone. Like, nobody wants an open floor plan. Everybody wants their own room. Get away from me. And I need a place to work because we're all home. Amanda, you mentioned you kind of started out, you got a little bitty baby, and then work productivity went up during the pandemic. So what's it been like?
It's first of all, I have to say that I've been extremely fortunate because my husband was forced to work from home, and so I had somebody at the house, which made things a little bit easier for us. But we have an almost 10-year-old son, and we have a 2.5-year-old daughter now. And I started at Tufts right after I finished my maternity leave. And so it takes about a year, I think, to kind of get yourself established and, write protocols. And I was doing tuberculosis research, which is in a biosafety level 3. And so there was a lot more steps involved trying to get research off the ground. And when the pandemic hit, basically not only was, anything like that sort of considered non-essential research, but essentially all the personal protective equipment that we use to do BSL-3 research was taken by the hospitals, and we donated like everything that we could find to the hospitals. So you couldn't, even if you were allowed to work, there was no PPE available to do my research, essentially. And I had a newborn baby, and so there was absolutely no working at home during the workday. So for the first 4 weeks, essentially, I would start working at 8 o'clock at night and work till like 2 or 3 in the morning. It was exhausting. It was absolutely exhausting. And again, my son was basically thrown to the wolves. I mean, the good news is he got to have the experience of sort of having that, childhood where you're out running around outside, and you just hope that, that he doesn't get eaten or stolen or something. I was never that kind of parent, but at the end of it, the only good thing I can say about this pandemic is that he has had the kind of childhood now that at least the past year that people talk about wistfully, running around the neighborhood, we don't know where he is. It feels very irresponsible. But we had to hire a nanny, which is extremely expensive, especially in the Boston area. And I think that when we talk about some of the challenges as veterinarians, women in academia, it's the fact that there is still an income gap. Academics are certainly not paid nearly as well as in private practice. And so you couple that with then needing to absolutely 100% hire a full-time nanny. It's financially could be catastrophic if you don't have a 2-income household, or if you don't have those resources available. So for the first 3 to 4 weeks where we didn't have the nanny hired, it was very, very hard. And then it got very easy. But every time the nanny came in, she was bringing her kid, because it was a nanny share, because I couldn't afford to do a full-time nanny. So she had her own children coming to my house. And they had like a second family, like her husband had 4 other kids, and so that lived in Rhode Island. And so it was literally like this fear of somebody getting COVID in and we literally had, 3 adults, 2 babies, and 2 10-year-old boys in one house every single day for the next 6 months. And it was at some point they let me go back to the lab because I was, as a veterinarian and a pathologist, I became essential. I started working on the SARS-CoV-2 work and I was essential at that point. So I could leave the house, which, was a treat.
As excitedly.
Was a treat. But, everybody else here, I mean, we're still dealing with the emotional aftermath of my son and my husband being in close quarters for almost 18 months. And I think that, to your point, Lubna, the emotional burden, not only are you trying to feed the kids, but when it comes to, are your kids developing appropriately? Are they getting the right kind of interactions that they need? Are they having a healthy mental lifestyle? Like, that's the stuff I'm worried about is, the toddler having the right emotional stimulation, that my son having a normal interactions with other children his age. And so when you, as a woman, as a mother, I feel like I'm bearing all of that stress of like, what is going to be the aftermath of him being in close quarters with his dad, and I'm like this all day long.
We just threw iPads at our children because it's just like, well, it's a crisis, it's fine, they can have iPads. Now trying to get them off the iPads is a huge challenge.
So many there's so much ricochet, I think, that's going to come off of this pandemic. I know that's one of the things that you were going to get to, Lisa, but I think that we are all going to be dealing with some sort of like ricochet effects of the things that we've had to do. So to be continued.
Yes. Tamara, how's it going out there in Missouri?
Whew, we're doing all right. Delta hotspot, just running. So yeah, I think like during the stay at home, my husband is a newspaper reporter. He works from home a lot. So it was, we invaded his workspace and we worked it out. We figured it out and we balanced it to the best we could. Right. But our kid turned 5 and then he just turned 6 during all of this. And he's not a very autonomous kid. We didn't already have an iPad or anything like that. And we were trying to balance, like, how much do we just prop you in front of something because mom or dad's got to get stuff done. Or, there's also some benefit to learning to be bored, right? Like we were trying to think like, how can we still try to parent in ways that feel true to how we want to parent? But I mean, like Mandy describing her house situation, like I felt my heart rate elevate just thinking, because it's just myself, my husband, and a 5-year-old and a small dog in this small little ranch home in Columbia, Missouri. And like the rest of that is a lot. So yeah, we figured it out. But I think some of that stuff that pre-pandemic folds over into what makes the pandemic hard are kind of that double shift aspect of women's work at work, and then you come home and you're also the primary caregiver and you're also the manager of household tasks, right? It's not that perhaps our spouses don't help, but they ask us what needs to be done, which presumes that we are the managers of the tasks, because we are keeping all those things in our head, right? And so during COVID times, then, because the day is so fragmented and there's things you still have to do, like I started to do what felt like third shifts. So there was like, I would work or trade off primary caregiving with my husband. We would try to do family time at dinner. And then like, there's the kids in bed, I work again, to just get the stuff done that I had to get done for the day. And I think that emotional labor piece is really huge. Helping not just my family and myself, but also students that I work with, colleagues that I work with, right? Like we tend to take on those roles, whether we perceive that expectation or that expectation is foisted upon us. But that became a really real part of processing our collective trauma that fell on, I think, a lot of women's shoulders. The flip side is that you're just at home. And I was working in my basement and it's unfinished and it is a mess. And I did not blur. I think that was pre-blurred black backgrounds. And so I was just like, this is what it is, y'all. Like, this is how we're working. I'm not trying to hide it. I don't have a pretty background. I'm just doing the best I can to survive. And I think something that we've all talked about, like that the paradox of being a professional woman, right? Like where we have to show up and behave in this very masculine world and not talk about those things that make us women. That just, the band-aids just got ripped straight off, right? Like your kid comes into the Zoom call, or they bounce through, or your dog barfs, or what, like that is just here now. And we're just going to do it. This is what makes me whole. And so I think like there's a part of that was kind of freeing. Like it was scary because I didn't have a choice, right? How much to be vulnerable. The world just made that choice for me. But I think that it, in some ways, for me personally, helped me feel more, I don't know, like self-assured or confident and living into the paradox of being a woman in a professional field who's a faculty member in a college of veterinary medicine that says like, I got a kid and I'm going to go to the book fair, or I'm going to the Valentine's party, I'm going to get a sugar rush, or like I'm bagging out today because it's my kid's birthday and he gets his day off school and I take the day off work and we eat donuts and do whatever the hell we want. So like that was like kind of the good and the bad mashed together as far as like the unique challenges of the pandemic. But you know, that there were a lot of things, and especially that emotional labor and the added, I always talk about it being, we're juggling things, but it's not like things. These are like running chainsaws that are sometimes lit on fire that we're just trying to not cut ourselves or anyone else around us. And like, there was just a lot more added to juggle during the stay-at-home time. And even now, thinking about navigating back to school, not just for our students here in the college, but I don't have another year to press pause on kindergarten. We're just going in this year. We're going to see how it goes. So yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you know, the whatever normal is still to be determined. You know, I just saw an article this morning about, hey, so is handshaking ever going to come back? Personally, no, don't even, don't try to shake my hand.
We're good.
I'm done with that. I'm done with that particular social moray. I'm done. But, you know, these things of, you know, Zoom interruptions. And I mean, you know, folks that don't even know that my daughter literally like does not get dressed until she is nearly walking out of the door to her job. So there's going to be a purple room just kind of wandering aimlessly in the background of my Zoom. So, you know, I think that certainly there has been some flexibility, and how do you know, I do think that the world is trying to figure out how to get some of that back into Pandora's box. But, you know, a question that I have, and Debbie, I want to start with you, is what are some of the things that higher ed systemically can do, maybe to kind of help address the ground loss, especially by women during the pandemic? You know, what can we do? And then, you know, for I'm certainly interested in other ideas that you all have about that. What can we do? What can systemically, what can we do?
I think right now it's not just about the pandemic. It's, you know, you take Black Lives Matter, you take the pandemic. I mean, really, even the Olympics, right? Some of the stories out of the Olympics where people just said, oh, I'm done. You know, I can't do this. I'm going to break my neck if I try to do this thing because I'm not ready to do that thing. And so I think universities, I think you'd have to be under a rock not to recognize that this is a very pervasive, and it's not just women. I think women may be differentially perhaps affected, but it is not just women. And so I see universities, and Tufts is a very liberal, you know, welcoming place. So I can't comment on just universities writ large, but I do see a concerted effort to try to be more, I'm going to say, compassionate. And they were compassionate to begin with, but and it's maybe not all out of the goodness of their heart. The faculty are going to start demanding that, right? They've seen all these pressures, and, you know, just this sense of exhaustion from all the comments that you just had from this panel. You know, the net effect is there's a point past which you just can't keep at it. And someone mentioned, and I think this is often overlooked, getting everything online, the amount of work that was required for women and men to move their courses online and then start to function online with everything else they're doing, it just snowballed. And so I believe that the administration saw that they recognized it, and that there's a lot of now faculty effort to try to find solutions that are sustainable, right? Universities aren't made of money. They are going to have to do that in a realistic way, but it doesn't feel like you have to justify it as hard anymore. And I don't know, I'd be very interested to know if you guys feel the same way.
I think for me, what I've really become aware of recently that we really need to try and support staff and colleagues with is the burnout. I think, I'm seeing we've really been encouraged by our institution to take annual leave. Now, we've been encouraged throughout the pandemic to take annual leave for our mental health. But people just didn't do it because they were like, well, I'm at home, I've got nowhere to go, I'm confined, this is not academic leave if I'm sitting in the house. I used to go to the supermarket and get excited about going to the supermarket. It was the only time I could get away from it.
Turn your radio on the drive, yeah.
Listen to what you want to listen to.
But I think because the school holidays here in Scotland finished at the end of June, colleagues have been taking time off over June and July. And, just even on Twitter and talking to people, people have taken that time off. They haven't completely switched off. They're responding to emails because, it's that fear of what you come back to. But now what I'm also picking up on is this sort of anxiety returning to work after having academic leave. And I think that's all really linked into this sort of burnout. The idea that we're going into our next academic session in a month's time, again, most of it will be online or more blended. And we've already been through the pivoting of that, and it was so difficult. And I think staff know that this next period is going to be really, really tricky, a lot of hard work. And I think people are struggling. I particularly find that really, really difficult. It's like, how do we navigate this next semester? And I think that's one of the things that I really think we need support from, is whether it's taking mental health breaks, taking mental health days off. And I know some institutions have instigated that, where you can take a mental health break because you just need time out. So I think that really needs to be sort of an immediate priority before we start the next academic session. I'm sorry, hopefully you can hear me. I'm in our loft, which I ended up in during COVID, and it's raining, torrential rain here in Glasgow.
Didn't hear any of it. It sounds great.
Yeah.
But I think that Lubna, you raised several important points, including take your leave, take time, be okay. And it's like, okay, so I'm going to take leave. I'm going to be stuck in the same house with the same people. And I'm just going from my makeshift desk to the couch. Like, it's not like that's the trip. And like you, yes, I get really excited about, going to Target. Like, I mean, like way too excited going to Target, right? And so, like I said before, the new normal is still to be determined. With future lockdowns, certainly Europe seems quick to lock things down. Lockdowns in the US are situational, shall we say, situational, geographically kind of diverse. What are you most looking forward to, and what are you most kind of fearful in terms of this next, let's just say, semester of academic life?
I'm going to chime in right now because I am truly fearful of this. So I mentioned my husband was forced to stay at home, right? And he has to go back to the lab or to his office at least a few days a week. And he works in Cambridge and we live in Southborough. So it's like, a good hour and a half commute on the train. The only way we've even been able to remotely manage what we've been doing is because he was home. And I am terrified of one of my children turning up positive, even if they're not sick for COVID, because if they're positive, like it's a 2-week quarantine. So it doesn't matter if there's lockdown or no lockdown. I'm going to be locked down for 2 weeks at a time if one of the kids turns up positive. And they're both going to be back in school, and I'm grateful for that. But not having a physical body in the house that could deal with that is like it could be catastrophic for me, and it gives me a lot of anxiety worrying about that. So it's been a constant concern, but we've been able to manage it somewhat. The few times that we had it happen once with my daughter, she was in a preschool program, and we had to do a 2-week quarantine because she was exposed to somebody in her class that came up positive, and I was grateful that it only happened once out of the whole year. But yeah, I mean, with the Delta variant and the kids not being vaccinated, I am super, super concerned. And I am praying that they approve the vaccine for the kids as soon as possible, because it would make me feel so much better. But I'm really worried about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, same on that. I think that's the returning to school I think it depends on where you're at, right? I think it depends on your college campus, the politics of your state, because public health is politicized, and how much that plays into the pressures and kind of the stakeholder dimensions that influence effective campus policies. I think same thing. My child's going to enter into kindergarten. For now, we're able to have kind of local control and have thresholds for the children and teachers wear masks or not based on current conditions in the county. I really appreciate that, but that doesn't take away all the worry that stops. So we all got to quarantine and stay at home, and we got to figure that out. And then my husband, he's an only child. He doesn't currently have elder care responsibilities, but that is a looming possibility, and has been for many years. And we've been very worried. I probably have worried more. That's just the position I operate in our relationship, about the health and well-being of his parents, but they live a couple states away. I mean, we've talked through contingency plans. If one of them were to get sick, for him to go, and what that might look like, and then what it would look like if he had to come back, and like how he might quarantine, or like how do we go through those steps, if and when we should have to deal with that. But there's a lot of things to think about. I mean, we're going to bring, this is our busiest time here at the University of Missouri. We have 3 cohorts of students in our main classroom building, in the didactic classrooms, for 8 weeks. And this building is packed. It was built back in the 60s for when we had cohorts of about 60 students. And now we have double that for 3 classes. And so this is a lot of bodies in one space, and a lot of Delta variant, and a lot of wishy-washy masking and uncertain vaccine stuff. I think that there's points of reflection that happen where we might challenge these long-held assumptions that we're able to deal with. I think, like, if you are tapped into some of the chat around, like, a lot of folks bristling at people asking for accommodations for their entire careers, and then suddenly everybody gets them because it's a pandemic and we have to, and hey, look, it worked out fine. There's a big push to kind of sweep all that under the rug and return to normal and pretend like nothing ever happened, rather than this collective reflection and processing of this shared traumatic experience, and how we might be better moving forward. And there's a tension for me, because there's this fundamental belief that I have that we're all going to come together, and that we can make something good and be progressive out of this. And at the same time, it's kind of antithetical to the very American individualistic sentiment that tends to prevail. So I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic, because that's the only place I can really be. I don't know, gestures at everything, right? It's a lot.
Yeah. Lubna, Debbie, any things that you're, biggest fear, but also kind of greatest opportunities during this next chapter?
I think at least in the UK, the vaccination rates are quite high now. So our kids go back to school in less than 2 weeks, and now it's thunder and lightning now. And the rules here have changed. So if anybody's positive, it's only the close contacts that are sent home, and And if they test negative, then they don't have to self-isolate. So I don't have the same sort of fears as the others have mentioned on here. I think for me, what's been great has been this summer without academic teaching. And it's allowed me to reconnect with my children, because I feel they have very much been sort of neglected for a long period of time. So that has been really good. I think my fear now is going back into another academic year that I know is going to be full on. There's going to be a lot about mitigating COVID. How do we mitigate the impact of COVID? And that's going to be a lot of work on top of what we currently have to deliver. And semester 2, which for us will start in January, the plans at the moment are that will all be face to face. So that's another transition that we need to prepare for as well. And on top of that, it's going to be supporting my children as well. My eldest is entering secondary school, so it's academically it's an important year, but not just academically, just in terms of their mental health. They've had no activities. There's been no hockey, no sports, and I can sense that there's a fear in them. They don't particularly want to go back and do all of those things because they're out of the habit of doing that. And it's, that is going to take more emotional work as well to deal with. So I'd like to be optimistic, but right now I'm a little bit scared, if I'm honest.
So we're going to make sure you hang out with Tamara a little bit more. Get on that optimism.
Yeah.
Optimism in the midst of chaos. Debbie.
So because I don't have kids at home, and I just, my heart goes out to you guys, because it would be so hard to, I think, Tamara, you said, kind of feel guilty all the time, like you weren't doing anything right because you were trying to get it all done. And so that's a common issue with people, I suppose, especially women. I guess I hope, and maybe this is just too naive, but I'm going to say it anyway. We've had an hour-long conversation about what are serious issues associated with being female in academia. But Lubna, I think you said we are fundamentally incredibly privileged that we are females in academia. And so I hope the universities take this opportunity to look outside the walls of the university and say, boy, oh boy, there are people who have way bigger problems than we do. What should this university be doing to acknowledge that? Whether that be in the town where the university is located or internationally where some of their grants may be located. That the problems that are compounded in poverty associated with the pandemic are just like 10x, 100x what we've been talking about. And so I hope maybe we don't get so head down that we forget that we live in this system which has dealt us a pretty good hand, and that the universities need to be part of kind of being a member of the community on some of this. So like I said, that may be way naive, but whatever.
That's great. Yeah, I do think that sometimes we do need this reality check, and that women and femmes of all kind of persuasions are experiencing slices and versions of this. So I want to end on a happy note. Not necessarily, well, yes, it can be happy. So what is your fantasy post-pandemic plan? Like we're talking fantasy here. Like, not just like, oh yeah, I'm going back to the office and I get to go back to my lab because there's now like rubber gloves for me to like put on. But like, what's that thing that you're, angling to do post-pandemic? So Debbie, I'm actually going to start with you. What are you going to do post-pandemic when whoever the powers that be says, yeah, it's over?
So we started a giant USAID grant in October of 2020, which normally would have included travel to all of the places that we were launching, like in-person launching. So you get to know these people. Yeah. The whole project has been virtual. We haven't met our own team. We haven't met the groups over there. So I hope we get released to travel. But one thing that I can tell you is, even though we've sort of felt this summer, okay, we turned some kind of a corner, Delta variant notwithstanding. But boy, when you're talking to Bangladesh or Uganda, they turned a corner and then they turned right around and we're faced with it all again. And I'm not just talking about people not feeling good, but mothers dying, And I mean, just terrible, terrible stuff. And so I really hope that the world gets to the point where we can actually travel again because it's safe enough to travel.
Yeah. Lubna, what's the
I mean,
post-pandemic fantasy?
I mean, I think again, it will be travel. I think, just to be able to go and see family abroad and just spend time with people that you love, and because they're the people that we haven't been able to see. I mean, I traveled last week to go and visit my sister and brother that I haven't seen for best part of a year, and it was great. I was in tears leaving because it'd been such a long time. So I think I'd like to do more of that, but I think I also just want to be able to support my colleagues as well, my female colleagues, as well as all my colleagues in sort of just making the environment and the culture much more supportive for everybody. And I think one of the things that we have learned from this is that, we can really reflect on our future. We can work in different situations. We can work from anywhere. We can adapt to all the changes that we need to adapt to. How much we travel, we can determine all of these things. And that's what I would really like to see. It's not hopefully it's not a fantasy, but I'd like to be able to see sort of our community of staff and students just having a bit more flexibility in how we do things.
Yeah. Mandy, post-pandemic fantasy.
Oh, well, mine's very pragmatic. I think that this pandemic has really shown me that I physically cannot do it all by myself. And I am just hopeful that that the grant writing will pay off and that I will be able to hire people to work in my lab so that when I have to quarantine again or something like this happens, that I'll have a team, that I'll personally have a team that will be able to help keep my lab running and allow me to actually find some balance in my life again with my children and everything. I think that that's been the hardest thing, is trying to keep all these balls in the air. And I definitely need help. And I'm also involved in a new task force at the vet school for recruitment and retention, which I'm not even sure it's been formally acknowledged or that the dean knows that we're doing. I mean, he knows we're doing this, but we haven't really advertised it that much. But as a member of that task force, I hope that, I can be a voice for our, especially the faculty that are trying to start labs and get more women the support that they need from the university to really emphasize the importance of providing that foundational funding to sort of help get hires done, hire people in the core resources that we need, and just provide them the emotional and financial support, because this really is about financial support to help women be successful in academia. So,
Tamara, post-pandemic fantasy.
Oh, there's so many. I think travel's a big one, but first I want to. During the pandemic for about a year now, I've been a part of this academic mothers group that we met on social media, Twitter, and we meet about weekly via Zoom, and we gripe, set writing our productivity goals, and then also self-care goals. And it's just been a really nourishing, supportive community. So huge shout out and love to Kiana, Rachel, Adrian, and Megan. I can't wait to meet them IRL when this is all over. But my husband and I really want to travel, and we want to travel with our kid. Growing up as two working class family kids who only went to visit people and have zero concept of like a vacation or seeing the world. And I've reflected a lot as an academic, like the substitute for that for me is now is like conferences. Like that still work. I was like going to visit family, but like it's coded differently now and it feels different or like professional. So no, we're gonna go on some legit vacations. And it's been fun to just fantasize about that as a family and then go to the library and get books and research about places. Our kid's been obsessed with the pyramids and Egypt and Sphinx and all these kinds of things. So we're like, oh, heck yeah, let's do that. So just being able to travel widely and to see the world and share that experience with my small family is my fantasy, hopefully reality plan for the post-pandemic world.
Good deal. So I am looking forward to kind of getting back to certainly some work travel. Just kind of some of DEI work is hard to do remotely. You need to be able to read the room, and even though I've gotten better at reading the Zoom, it's not quite the same, right? One of my fantasies is that my daughter is able to resume her kind of collegiate experience. It was abruptly, ended. She came home for spring break and it's been here ever since. But one thing that, it's not post-pandemic and I will be testing and doing all the things, but I am going on vacation. And as much as folks are like, I want to go on vacation with my family, I do not. I will be going by myself in about 8 weeks to Mexico for just like, I'm just going to be a rotisserie chicken on the beach, just flipping myself over for a few days just to rest. And I think that, all of us need to be really, really mindful and supportive of not only women, but everyone really trying to find ways of practicing self-care and well-being and taking care of ourselves and taking care of one another. So with that, I will thank each of you for joining me and participating in this conversation. It's just been really rich and encouraging and depressing, because there were things pre-pandemic that I hope, just vanished. That's the other thing for my fantasy. I just hope that a lot of the things that have just been exacerbated by the pandemic actually are able to fade away entirely post-pandemic. So thank you, Mandy, Tamara, Lubna, Debbie for joining me. This has been another episode of AAVMC's Diversity and Inclusion on Air. Again, thank you to my guests. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app and like us on Facebook. Shout out to all those wonderful, wonderful faculty members doing the hard work. I joke with folks all the time that didn't think that online education was really a thing. They thought, you give them listen to some YouTube videos. Yeah, no. So shout out to folks doing the hard work with online education as the semester starts. We will be back back with another show later this week. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Lisa.